Everybody knows that quote, don't they? That history is written by the victors. And it just feels, on this one topic, that the victor was decided before the battle had happened.
I'm Jane.
And I'm Bets.
And this is
Inciteful Sisters.
Hello, welcome to Inciteful Sisters. Before we begin, I'd just like to do an advert. There is a book festival, a fringe book festival indeed, in Manchester on the 29th of November. It's got an amazing lineup. Joe Bartosh, Susan Dalgetty, Hudis Fletcher, Fiona McInerney, Susanna Rustin, Joan Smith, Victoria Smith, Nick Wallace. It's being run by the Women's Rights Network in Manchester. And Bex and I are going to be there as some of the interviewers. Also, some of the authors are also interviewing. So it's going to be a pretty amazing event. So have a look online and get your ticket. We'll see you there. So we're doing something a little bit different tonight because we are celebrating a 1 year. Can you believe that, Bex?
No, I can't actually. I thought we would run out of things to talk about.
We've been going for a whole year. We thought we'll do this thing and try it, and here we are a year later. So we thought we'd just have us tonight. Hope you don't mind that. So I'm gonna ask Bex, how and why did we do this mad thing?
See, I can't give the full answer because I can't answer for what drew you into it. But the way that I recall it is I went to see you host an interview. I went to see you host a few interviews at Virago Women's Workshop. I think they were better than I had even expected. I knew that they were going to be good and I was really excited about the speakers. But I had not expected how engaging it was and how exciting it was to be in a space where it was just women-centred and only women as well. So then on the drive home after I think the second time I went to see you speak, maybe to Julia Long, you said, I'm thinking we should record some of these so that we reach a wider audience. And I thought it was a really good idea. You said, well, I don't really know the techie side of stuff. And I said, well, I can do that. I can help you to record a podcast. I can do a bit of editing, be behind the scenes helping you run it.
So you basically fell right into that trap.
I never thought that I would be the one asking the questions, that's for sure.
No, that started episode 2. I think you were already a bit fed up and you thought, no.
We had Alison Ellis on, didn't we? And
that's right.
It was so much about TikTok and social media and all of these young people's apps and the level of control and censorship on them. And I said, I'll write you some questions if you like. And you're like, oh yeah, great. And then you sort of said to me, I think maybe the next day you were like, oh, so do you want to do the second part of the interview? And I'll do the first part focusing on, her experiences as a young lesbian. And I was like, it sort of dawned on me, I'm asking the questions I've written. And I dreaded it. I was so anxious. And then you sort of almost forget that actually what you're just doing is you're speaking to people and amazing people every time.
Yeah. That's the thing. I mean, even when I was doing this at Virago, and it was, like you say, such a small space, just a wonderful space. We miss it dearly. And only maybe 20, 25 women in there. But it's still, the first time I was asking questions of somebody, it was quite nerve-wracking. And then I just said to myself, get a grip. You're just talking to this woman. Just forget about the rest of the room.
Yeah.
But we've had some amazing, amazing people. We've been so, so lucky, haven't we?
Yeah, we have. Yeah, I mean, that first interview with Still Tish, it still stands up. And it was one of my proudest moments because it was this moment where all the way through it was like, okay, so this is something that we're trying. And then by the end of it, what we had was a very polished, I mean, probably now I'd listen back to it and be like, oh God, I could do such a better job with editing. It was like sort of polishing up a diamond, like it was an incredible interview. And we put it out and it was
You're
like...
saying Tish is a rough diamond. She'll like that.
Well, I think we were really. And
yeah,
we put it out and people didn't hear sort of two women having a go at it. They heard two people interviewing. And that was so nice. I mean, the feedback immediately, people sort of reaching out and saying that they liked what we'd done.
Yeah, and I'm sure she won't mind us telling this, but as she got crosser and crosser as she was talking about some of the things that she'd researched, she started tapping her keyboard.
Yeah.
You had to go through, didn't you, and edit all those taps out.
Each individual bang of the table, yeah, I did. And I was so committed because I did a first edit and I was like, well, it's just us and it's our first ever. And then I'm a perfectionist. And so I had this moment of like, no, if we're going to do this, I'm doing it right. And I'm going through and each individual tap, I'm editing it out. So I had to reconstruct, as I recall, some of her words. So where she'd said, like a long word, like, I don't know, difficulties or something, I had to find the syllable that was where the bang had happened from another word she said later and pop it in the middle so that it still sounded like she said difficulties. I mean, this was technical stuff, Jane.
Yeah. Well, I'm not a perfectionist, so if I'd been in charge of that aspect, it wouldn't have happened at all. And then we had Susan Dalgetty and Lucy Hunter Blackburn. That was our second one, and that was quite because there was such a lot to fit in a short episode, wasn't there?
Yeah. I mean, it's just, I think that one, it was like, well, that's quite surprising that they've agreed to speak to us because Women Won't Waste was such a huge book and so successful. It was like, well, this is great, but where do you even begin with it? Because there were so many different stories and so many voices, and it was really interesting just speaking to them and hearing about the process that they had to go through to get it published. Quite a nice underdog story, really, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. It's a David and Goliath.
It was, yeah. Yeah, especially that publisher that said, we don't think people will be interested. I bet they held their head in their hands when they saw it being a bestseller.
We turned down the Beatles. So that was really good. We'd just been to Filia together. It was just lovely seeing all the women. We had a stall there, which was great. And people came up and chatted to us. And I think my favourite comment or question was to you, because obviously I'm a lot older, and somebody asked you how we'd met. So
Yes.
would you like to tell people how we met?
Well, it's really interesting. We met on a shady alley, an anti-trans rally. No, so I'm Jane's niece. She's my aunt. And so we were having picnics back in the day, weren't we? And she was my bubble during the COVID lockdown. I'd met her before that, obviously.
Yeah. It's not that we're the family.
No, yeah. I'd known her my whole life, but during COVID in particular, that was when I first raised trans issues and gender critical issues with you. And I think J.K. Rowling really helpfully spoke up around the same time.
Yeah.
And Jane is always someone that you can trust to go and do her own research and, come back with her own perspective. So I think my comments really were very light and I just sort of trusted. I knew that you'd go and look into it and I was very happy when you did.
Yeah. It's unusual, isn't it, to be piqued by, because what were you then, 25?
20, I must have been 24, 25, yeah.
So it's unusual to have that way round somehow. But I was like a typical, live and let live.
Yeah.
And, thought a lot of the things that had happened to women's rights and gay rights in the last few years were just so positive and just hadn't really thought this through.
Well, I wanted to ask you about that, actually. I mean, because you have often said that you sort of came back to women's rights and to feminism because of this topic. I've heard you say more than once that you kind of thought that there'd been big pushes during your youth, but we'd really reached the point of equality. We'd reached the point where it was just little things maybe to iron out now. I have to ask, what was the realization like, or, how was that experience for you of realizing the very most fundamental part of it, the definition of woman, is now under question?
Yeah, that was a real surprise. Yeah, because I went to uni in 78 to 81. So I was 21 in 81. And so I was involved in all sorts of things that were about equal rights, apartheid and the Anti-Nazi League and things like that. And I went to Greenham Common. And then to suddenly realise that this isn't what I thought it was, that was really shocking. And because I've worked in education as well, I immediately thought about teenagers, because for a lot of years I looked after a group of resit students. And resit students are really interesting. This was in a college, so they're really interesting because they just failed something at school, so they come to you for a fresh start, and they want to have another go at education. And often they want to leave school because they either didn't like school or they didn't fit in, and they want to make new friends and so on. And it can make them quite vulnerable, and you get a lot of sort of social contagion amongst a group like that. So we'd have years where there was anorexia or bulimia or a cannabis fad going through the group, and self-harm. And I sort of, once I realised what was going on, I just saw immediately that it's another sort of that sort of vulnerable behaviour. And that was really distressing. And once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. So I think that's why when we're interviewing, a lot of our interviews are really, I think, have a focus on young people because it's so important to keep them safe. So
Yeah.
yeah, that has been really fascinating.
I mean, even for me, I really relate to what you see a lot of gender critical or sex realist women saying, which is, I've become politically homeless. I'm still where I always was on the political spectrum, but things have moved and suddenly I'm not considered left wing anymore.
Yeah.
And even for me, in my lifespan, that's taken me by surprise. I think that having been there, though, I mean, there were huge human rights waves. And like you say, so much going on in the 70s and 80s around civil rights and equality. And it must be strange to look back and think, at what point did we lose the ball? At what point did it, shift over to these other groups that don't really have the same intentions, don't really have our best interests at heart?
Yeah. I don't know what left and right means anymore. I knew what it meant when I was younger. I studied Marxism, and it's a useful theory. It's a theory for looking at literature or looking at history. I think the problem now is that a theory, the intersectional theories, it's been made into a system, not a theory. So that's really interesting.
So that's interesting because I don't think I've heard you say that before. What do you mean that they've turned it into a system rather than a theory?
Well, I think I was thinking about things like bring your whole self to work. When I started teaching, it would have been unthinkable to tell a student how you voted or anything really about your private life. That was what you didn't bring to work. They didn't need to know that. You were there to get them through the exam or teach them that particular subject. So that's changed. The relationship with HR has changed as well. HR is much more involved in people's everyday working than it ever was when I started. So there are things like that. And then there are also other things that are seen as okay to do at work, wide networks and the particular groups that staff can get involved in to join them together at work to give them some sort of social life. And they tend to be interest groups like Pride or, I don't know, like a running group or something. Whereas in the past we were, it was an annual thing to get together and celebrate Christmas or the end of term or something. And you mix with everybody. So it was much more, in a way, it was a much more cohesive workforce that was slightly distanced from the student body. I don't know if I'm explaining that very well.
Yeah, that's interesting because I think that I've grown up with that culture in place in work. But I can see what you're saying that, I mean, when I was younger, before I'd entered the workforce, I remember older people saying, oh, you never bring your full self to work and things like that about holding back and being quite reserved. But by the time I got into the workforce, certainly that was I've never worked anywhere that's had an atmosphere of holding back. People are very evangelical and upfront about sexuality, their private life, their political stance, all these things that maybe should be taboo or should just not matter because they're not relevant to the job you're doing.
Yeah. I'm interested in what happened to you because you had a really amazing experience as a young person, didn't you, when you went out to work in the refugee camps? What was that like? Because you were...
Yeah, I mean, it was an interesting one. The refugee camps, It was very unexpected for me to go into that job. I saw these stories about it in the news. I wanted to get involved. I wanted to help. So I checked the website of this charity and I saw that there was a full-time volunteering role in refugee camps in a German-speaking area of Europe, and I took the job. And so I hadn't really there was very little preparation. It was the middle of the refugee crisis and camps were sort of bursting at the seams and it was very political. People were talking about it in Britain. It hadn't really hit us yet. So I had been very liberal feminist and I think quite sheltered really from a lot of realities. But the first red flag was that it was a mixed sex refugee camp.
What impact did that have on how they organised themselves?
Well, the women were quite invisible, really. So it was an old hospital building. The women were tucked away on sort of what was, I suppose, seemed to be a quiet, secluded wing. It was a ground floor wing, and so there was an outside door. So it was meant to be that, that was their area and the men couldn't go in there, but obviously they did. For the most part, it was very peaceful, actually, and a lot of the men were quite respectful, but there were troublemakers, and that is the thing, when you mix the sexes, you can't guarantee women's safety anymore. There were a lot of issues with problematic behaviour from men, and it meant that these women withdrew, and it was very, very hard to get them to engage with anything, because I think they knew that their safety, safety in quotation marks, was to stay in their wing. And even there, they would get unwanted visitors. Was a sexual assault, at least, a couple while I was there. And while I was there, two things really happened that I struggled with. One was that a brothel opened up. Our country was bordering onto Germany. And a brothel opened up 5 minutes across the border in the middle of nowhere, just this old rundown house. Somebody bought it and named it Club Tropical. Now, there was nothing tropical about the house. What was tropical was the women on offer, and it was our women. And I did some work as a medical secretary, and so maternity appointments came under my purview. And we had 9 women fall pregnant all at once. And these women don't even know. They're asylum seekers. They're not refugees. They do not know if they'll be able to stay in the country.
Wow.
They do not have the details of the father. Them and their child don't have any right to remain. Just no medical history of who the father is, and they could at any point have their asylum claim denied and be sent home with this child. The situation would be so much worse than when they first came seeking asylum.
Yeah.
I've really struggled with the lack of safeguarding.
Yeah.
That we gave towards our women in the centre. We also had, while I was working there, 2016, I don't know, perhaps some listeners will remember, an international scandal broke about sex abuse in different foreign aid charities, yeah. I mean, it was across every single charity in the sector. So you have this international scandal going on. You have the situation with trafficking on the increase in Germany after they had obviously legalised the sex trade. And you had the issues between residents within the centre itself. And it really did feel like these women were absolutely under attack from all directions. And I think when I returned back to the UK, it made it very hard for me to relate to liberal feminists and to the feminist spaces that I had previously been in that were sort of saying these mantras like sex work is work. And you were beginning to see these arguments about mixed sex spaces or that things should be unisex so that it's more comfortable for trans people. It made it very hard for me to relate to that.
Yeah. I remember listening to Helen Joyce talking about how people got into this movement and realised that sex was so important. And she said nearly all of them have had a moment where they've had to look into the eye of something difficult before. And you've just sort of really illustrated that by the experiences that you had while you were doing that job.
Yeah, it was definitely, so I was 21 when I went out there. I was quite fresh out of university. And so it was a baptism of fire. And it really made me, I mean, before this had happened, I had thought that feminism in the West had really become quite a theoretical thing, and there wasn't any real boots on the ground action required anymore. And this really opened my eyes to how vulnerable women are hidden from us.
Yeah. Well, are there any of the interviews that we've done that have reminded you of that fact?
I mean, Isabel Tulou, which she obviously spoke about the work she does with survivors of trafficking and the sex trade. And I really respected her for that work, and also for, you know, the opinions that she shared. And she changed the way I think about sexual assault and sexual, abuse cases, and how we conduct them.
She amazed us when she started talking about consent. That was really fascinating, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I had never thought about consent in those terms before. No, I mean, I think it's true. I think, like what you say about things being turned into a system, it's like we've been taught that there's a correct way to discuss topics and a correct way to think around issues. And so it was just so refreshing, that interview with her, where she just said, actually, I don't think that consent should be part of sexual assault trials. And you're thinking, how is she reasoning this? And then hearing her, it was like, yeah, it's the big issue that everybody can see and nobody knows how to address, that every rape and every sexual abuse trial centres around the victim and figuring out if they communicated their lack of consent well enough. And it turns it into like an inquisition into them. Yeah, I think she's pretty groundbreaking, actually. She's amazing.
We've tried, haven't we, to have a mix of things, because the thing that people often say to women who are in the sex realist movement is, oh, you're just obsessed with this issue. And so one of the things we wanted to do was to show the range of what people are doing. And we've had some amazing things. I'm thinking, I'll say a few names, but I won't obviously be able to mention or remember them all. But things like the Best Friends Handbook, which was fabulous, something for friends to share amongst themselves and give advice to each other. Or Ruth from La Leche League. That was really, really staggering and quite distressing at times to listen to. Emma, who talked about the children of transitioners. There's so many different women's rights movement that are woven in and amongst all of these things. I think the first type of those that we did was the Hague Mothers, wasn't it?
I was going to say the Hague Mothers was a really big one. And I think, do you know what always strikes me about this is that this is why it's so important to keep having gender critical conversations, but almost what we've tried to do is to say, that's the base, that's the starting block to accept the reality of sex. But there's further conversations that need to be happening, that because our time, and I do think this is intentional, we're having to waste so much time defining what a woman is again, that we're being distracted from some really major issues around pornography, around women's rights, around what's going on with boys, and as they call it, the manosphere or incel ideology, that women should be focusing on. So to get through the gate and to talk to us, you have to be realistic about sex. But beyond that, we're really open to speaking to anybody. And with the Hague Mothers, I know you had seen them and met them and spoken to them at Filia previously, but I really went into that episode quite blind to the reality of what was going on. And it was shocking. I was in tears, as we recorded it.
Yeah, we've cried a lot, actually, haven't we? We've cried a lot in a lot of episodes. The episode that we did with Mums Undercover, I think both of them have been, everybody's been quite tearful. And I can't imagine how hard it is to hold all that together.
No. Yeah, it's true.
They were so generous with their time.
Yeah. I mean, I think the Undercover episodes are some of my favourite, because what has been lost is the voices of normal women. To this whole generation, my generation, we have grown up being taught about trans rights, and we have lost the voices of normal women telling us, no, this is the reality of what we're going through. This is the reality of our perspective. This is the reality of our lives, because they've been shouted down and silenced. And so those episodes for me really matter the most. Just like when we're talking to normal NHS workers who they have to be anonymous because, they could still lose their job, they could still be in trouble. If you're not speaking to them, if you're not giving them a platform, they're not going to get it anywhere else. And I think that's a tragedy, actually.
It's terrible.
Losing the voice of older women has been part of what's made so many of my generation and younger people assume that all was good and all was well with what they were being told about gender, because dissenting opinions weren't allowed.
I love the House Undercover one as well.
Yeah.
I think that when we recorded that, it's a shame in a way that it wasn't on film, because our jaws literally dropped. We were like, say what again? Sorry?
There's just so many moments where they spoke and you were just thinking,
how could we have got here? How could the biggest employer in the country?
Yeah. Seen in journalism, big peek behind the curtain.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Yeah. I mean, that was great. I love the Scene in Journalism episode, and I love their podcast as well. I always listen to it as soon as it comes up. They really are insightful, and it's what journalism and the media has been missing.
Yeah.
We really need that honesty from journalists. We need people just to tell us what's happening, and then we'll decide what we think about it. We don't need to be told by anybody.
Yeah.
We just need the facts. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
All the women that we've interviewed, because we do only interview women, have had a struggle to get their stories out and have had pushback and haven't been covered. I mean, it's really obvious when you get the writers in particular, because their writing won't be published either in a newspaper or in print. But we've had Emma Dolan, who got cancelled from a gallery that she'd been at for, I think, 17 years in Leeds, because she'd had some, and I'm doing the air quotations, transphobic art that she was working on. They've all suffered in some way. They've all had pushback. They've lost friends. It's just a myth to say that people are not being cancelled and that it's not a brave thing to do this.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting what you say specifically about writers as well, because that, a lot of what's written and recorded, that will be the history in the future. Those will be the historical documents they look back on. Like, everybody knows that quote, don't they? That history is written by the victors. And it just feels, on this one topic, that the victor was decided before the battle had happened.
It's a good analogy.
We never got to argue it out. We never got to put our points across. We never got the discussion or the debate. It was just decided. And I really wonder who decided that. I mean, we've said many times it feels it was decided from the top down.
Yeah. Well, if you speak to Tish, she will tell you that it's all part of Denton's plan, and if you download the Denton's document, which I think is still available, there's so much in there about, ensuring things are in policy and that you've got people on committees before you progress, and piggybacking, as they did in Ireland with gender recognition, they piggybacked it into another law.
Yeah.
There's so many rules that Denton suggests that have just been used to work its way into the movement and to put everything in place before we really understood what was happening. Well, certainly I didn't understand what was happening.
It's worked very well, and it's quite alarming how well it's worked, really.
It's true. We've had some fun as well. We had Elaine Miller on. That was a laugh.
It was.
Again, people are so generous, because we've approached people and sometimes we've been like, ooh, this person said yes. And Elaine was I was particularly chuffed because I messaged her and she said, "Oh, yes, I've listened to you." And I was like, "Oh, my God." Because when we started, we had this ongoing joke that our listeners would be your mum and my sister. What we didn't tell people was that that was the same person. So we have, I mean, we don't get huge numbers, but we do have a little core of fans, including, hello, Julia, the On It woman.
Yes. Yeah, I always look out for that. I can't rest easy until I've seen that comment on it. There was an episode recently, I don't know, she must have gone on holiday or something, but it was sort of maybe a week later that she put, "Bit late on it now." It's like, thank God, I thought we'd lost her.
She needs to send us her holiday dates, I think, so that we can just work around it. I was going somewhere with my husband. He said to me, "I can't believe you've been doing this for a year." He said, "I never thought that you would manage to do this regularly, fortnightly for a year." And I'm pretty impressed with this.
I know. Actually, I had some doubts before we started. I just thought, like, I can see us being interested in it, but I can see it tapering off. Like, we'll run out of people to speak to, topics to cover, or we'll lose steam with it. And it just hasn't happened like that because I think a lot of it comes down to our guests and how amazing they are. And it's like, well, if you had the opportunity to speak to all of these women, would you not want to speak to them too? You know,
It's been fantastic. You
we're
come
so,
away, we're so buoyed up, aren't we,
yeah.
afterwards? And we often catch up the next night and like, "Oh my God, wasn't that amazing?"
Yeah. We've been so sort of incredibly lucky with it, and it just feels like, I've had jobs in the past where I felt a similar way, like this is something that's happening now and it will not be happening forever. And when it's over, people will look back on this for generations to come. Really, they will. They will look back and they will study this and they will try to understand the different perspectives. And we are here speaking to some of the key voices in what's going on. Even, we're not going to be some huge part of history, but just the ability to play our small role and to capture what we capture and to do our bit. I just think, every day I'm sort of like, well, it can't really grind you down. Once you look into the movement and look at the amazing women and all the things that they're doing, it can't really weigh you down. It's just how incredibly lucky we are to live in this movement, in this time when women are speaking up and we're defining ourselves for once and for all, I expect.
Yeah. I love that you said all of that. And I was thinking, oh, do you know what? Bex is so noble. And I think I'm just a nosy cow.
We have to edit out the sort of 50 questions Jane asks people about their daily routines and personal lives.
That's not true. Amina Lone, mentioning that Amina Lone's episode. I loved that episode. I thought, what an interesting perspective.
Yeah.
And this week, as we're recording this, and there's the grooming gang's debacle that's going on, and Amina's take on it was so interesting.
Yeah, so balanced. I mean, she had really thought. I think I always appreciate it when you speak to someone and you're like, you've really thought about this round every perspective and from all sides. And you're so fair in the conclusions that you've drawn. And it's in a similar way to Isabel. It's refreshing to speak to somebody that is so eloquent and so well thought out and considered in their approach to a topic,
Yeah. And then the week after Amina, I think it was Connie. I knew Connie from Virago, and she's such an inspiration. She's amazing. She's got such energy, but also she's got such insight, and she's 22. It's frightening.
Yeah. What I liked about that is that we prepared our questions separately for that one. And we inadvertently ended up doing a full tour of her schooling life, from sort of primary level right up to university and leaving uni. And that was quite a nice insight into the way that she changed her mind, And I really related to a lot of what she said because in a similar vein, I was very much in liberal feminist spaces and very much would have considered myself an ally before I thought too carefully about things. But hearing somebody her age that's really got that clarity and has really thought it through, I'm not surprised that a lot of young people have followed in her footsteps. I think she's a bit of a leader for her generation.
Definitely. She's definitely a leader. There was something she was talking about when she was talking about being at school, and she saw herself as treading new paths. And I thought it was amazing. I thought the other thing that was amazing was that it really showed the role of the activist teacher all the way through, because she didn't have anybody coming into school, mermaids or gendered intelligence or whoever didn't come in and preach in school. It was the teachers bringing things in via things like the civil rights teaching in the history program, presumably through the other humanities as well. And so it was the activist teachers, but also the outside world seeping in through social media.
And her, interestingly enough.
Yes, I know. Well, she said herself, didn't she, that she was totally on board.
Like to feel that she understood things that other people, were struggling to understand. And
Yeah.
she's got that amazing quote where she's like, "No, you don't understand, Grandma," which I just think is perfect. I'm sure it's been said by so many trans rights activists up and down the globe at this stage. No, Grandma, you don't get it.
Had a really proud moment this weekend. This is a personal thing, but my grandson told his mum, he's 5, by the way, and he told his mum, do you know that some boys can be mums? So my daughter immediately said to him very suspiciously, "Who told you that?" And he does this thing where he sort of looks around and stares up in the air for a suitable answer and said, "Nana, that's me." And my daughter said she just laughed. She said, "I threw back my head and laughed and said, I don't know who told you, but it wasn't Nana." And she said, "And anyway, it's wrong. Boys can't become mums."
Yeah, God, it's crazy that it starts so young, isn't it? It's crazy.
I wonder who did tell him, but at least he has her to tell him that that's rubbish.
Yeah.
I was very proud.
Yeah.
So what have we got coming up, Beck?
I don't know. I think that's my question to you.
I do programming. I'm in charge of programming. Bex does tech. I'm admin. We've got biology and medicine we're recording with this weekend, so we're looking forward to recording with them. When we were at Philia, we met some amazing people. We'd like to do something on the silencing in the WI, and we took notes at Philia, so somebody suggested this, but then didn't give us a name or a contact. So if there's anybody who wants to talk to us about that, that would be interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Philia was great. There's so many different topics. I don't want to spoil it, but we took a pen and notepad to our stall and we just let people come up and chat to us about what had brought them to Philia, what mattered to them. And that were just, as ever with Philia, there's just so many different causes, so many different women, so many different sort of backgrounds and experiences. And so we filled up, I think, 6 pages of that notebook with different people that we would like to interview.
Yeah.
So we're definitely stocked, but as ever, we're always on the look, aren't we, for the next thing to talk about and the next person to talk to.
If you think you've got an interesting story,
I'd quite like to do some more undercover episodes. I think there's more sectors like teaching and education, counselling, things like that, where if your sector or some element of your life has been particularly affected by this, I think we would love to talk to people who maybe want to remain anonymous, because those, like I said, those are the voices that, people aren't getting to hear. And so it's almost the most important thing that we can do is to give them a platform.
Yeah. And I think I'd like to revisit next year. I'd like to revisit some things. We've already talked to Hague Explained about revisiting the Hague mothers issue. So that will be interesting.
Yeah.
So there's quite a few things we've got listed that we want to come back to. Just staying on topic, really.
Mm-hmm.
So would you recommend it?
What, the podcast? No, personally, I wouldn't.
Would you recommend doing it?
What, coming to speak to us? Yeah, I mean, at your own risk, obviously. Keep all limbs inside the vehicle at all times. Yeah, I would. I think we don't bite.
No, we always tell people, well, I mean, we've outed ourselves now, but we always tell people at the beginning of the interview that we're related, because I always think they must think it's quite strange when we start sort of sniping at each other.
Yeah. Like, oh gosh, they don't get on. And
No.
actually, no, we do. It's just we've known each other all my life at least. So we've got a past.
So
Perfect. So
So
that's what's next.
Bex, your woman of the moment.
I was just going to say, we finish on the same question every episode, Jane. I hope you've prepared for this because it's embarrassing if you haven't. Who's your woman of the moment, Jane?
I'm going to say the women in my family. So my 2 daughters, my 2 nieces, my sister, my cousins, all women that I'm very close to, know a lot about. My bestie. I have a bestie who I love to bits, and it's saved us thousands in therapy. We we talk about everything. And she's supportive about this, but not particularly interested, if that makes sense. So I could talk about it to her, but you won't see her on a rally or anything. But she knows what a woman is, and that helps.
Yeah.
So those are my women of the moment. So you're involved in, and that's your second nomination.
There we go. What can I say? Yeah. I think that's a really fair one, isn't it? Like the women that we know and that are closest to us and that are in our confidence, that's what keeps us going. So now you've said that, I suppose I can't.
You can't. You could have J.K. Rowling, but I mean, nothing against you, Jo, but you've been a woman of the moment in, what would you say, about 25% of 25%?
More definitely. Do you know, honestly, I think my women of the moment, all of the women that we've interviewed have been great, but I do have to say Amin Alone and Isabel Tulu changed the way I think on a fundamental level. The women in our undercover episodes and the Hague mums opened my eyes to the sort of hidden realities that women are facing around the world. So all of the women we've spoken to have opened my eyes in different ways, but some of them, I still sit and think about those episodes, those issues, those voices, those perspectives. And they've changed the way that I think. And I suppose it's, for me, my women of the moment are the ones that have drawn my eyes and my attention to this. So in a way, it is you. Because if you had not co-opted me into this podcast, I don't know that I would be half so aware of so many things as I am now. You know, it's made me a better feminist, and I think it's made me a better woman. And, you know, all the women that I've not met yet are also my women of the moment. All the women that are in Afghanistan and in the Middle East that are protesting and pushing and trying to earn their freedom. We don't get to hear their voices at all, and we don't get to know their names for obvious reasons. But I look forward to a future where they can come and sit at the table and speak to us and tell us their stories too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's a strange world.
it is.
Well, yeah. So Stephanie Davis Arai, when we had her on, she said, didn't she, I love all of the women. And I just thought that was just so lovely.
Yeah,
She was such a lovely person, and it was such a lovely thing to say.
she is great. She's great. I mean, that episode was lovely as well. And the book, she was right about the book, you know, it made me cry.
Yeah, it does. It does.
It's like you get to that line and oh my God. I was like, I'm not even a granny. I'm not the target audience. I'm neither a child nor a grandma. And yeah, I'm sat here crying about my imaginary grandchildren. It's potent stuff from Rachel Rooney, honestly.
Yeah, it was lovely. Well, I hope that we haven't bored everybody silly. I hope we've also made them think, I didn't listen to that one. I'm going to go back and listen to that one. Can we finish on a plea? Can you please share and comment on whatever you listen on, whether you listen on podcast or on YouTube? And I'd like to explain why, because if you comment, occasionally it draws some opposition, let's say.
Are you telling people to rage bait?
I'm telling people to rage bait. But I explained this, didn't I? I explained in long detail what I thought we should do, and you said, that's rage bait. Why didn't you just say that? Because I didn't know what it was.
Jane Marie invented the concept of rage baiting, which is essentially where you post something that you know is contentious in the hopes that people will respond to it negatively. And in doing so, because nothing gets people frothing at the mouth and typing comments and coming back to the same video again and again as much as being angry with it. And so what we found is, on podcast episodes where people are particularly angry with us, they also engage more. And so it spreads more. It spreads the word, and it does us some good.
It
in
always
a way.
happens on YouTube. I think people find it harder to find the comments on
Other apps. Yeah.
other apps.
It's true.
We'll get better at all of this, but thank you so much for everybody out there for listening. All two of you, or all one of you. But no, it's been fabulous. It's been a great year. Thank you very much to Bex as well, because really without her technical know-how we couldn't do this. And then I'd be writing letters in green ink to local newspapers.
Thank you to our listeners. We really hope that you've enjoyed this episode. And if you have, please do like, share, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff to help keep our channel growing and spread the word. Thank you.